Great. So for those of you who follow meteorology, I'm not a meteorologist, but I work with some of them. We can never attribute a specific weather event to climate change, but boy, are there a lot of events like this happening year after year after year. That sort of confirm what the models were saying. So without going that and opening that up to too much debate, which we can do, sorry for opening it then. So if some of you want to discuss that topic later, I'll be glad to. Like she said, I'm interested in sustainable siting. How we do siting of enough solar so that it's affordable, it's good for the environment, and it doesn't piss people off because of inequities that are being done in the way that it's sited. And a lot of the siting in Virginia has been done terribly. Some of the first projects were just atrocious and really gave it a bad name. And without going into the backstory of why, there are now, why it was so atrocious, there are now a lot of new regulations coming out to improve the environmental components of siting, but it's nowhere near enough. So pretty much all of my research is related to this. Yes, sir. And we will end with lots of what we should do. Yeah. So to back up about why we need this, you can read the screen here. I hate to read it. We're already estimated to be at least at 1.5 degrees Celsius increase over baseline. And they say no more than 2-degree increase. The goal was 1.5, but now they're saying 2, and we'll see where it goes. There are thousands of pages of report on the economic, the environmental, the social health impacts from going over 1.5 or 2 degrees Celsius, but I won't go into that. So as a solution to climate change, renewables are a part of the answer, right? And that's the part that I tend to focus on. Sure, we need some natural gas as a transition or as backup until batteries become more affordable. There's talk about nuclear for baseload reductions. I'd rather not get into all of those debates so that I can focus on how we can do solar well. Okay, and surprisingly, yeah, we're 7th in the country in the number of projects that are being developed here, because Virginia has such an incredible energy need going on. Yeah. And the last governor passed a plan, the Clean Energy, the Virginia Clean Energy Act, with a plan to move us towards renewables. And in fact, Virginia Tech now has a climate action plan that was passed 4 years ago, where we're supposed to be carbon free for all the electricity by 2030 and for the whole university by 2050. And so beyond electricity, you've got things like converting the trucks and the auto fleets, all of that, to electrification and the heating and cooling, that type of thing. So what's led to such an expansion in solar? Sorry about this graph. Oh, too much in there. Let me blow it up for you some if I can. So levelized cost of energy. That's the cost of energy over the lifespan of a project, from construction to operation to decommissioning, right? And so we can see back in 2009, solar was up at about $359 per megawatt, whereas the cheapest source was geothermal. And then we had combined cycle gas, and then we had gas peaking power plants, and then we had wind. And then up here we had, I can't quite see it here. Looks like another onshore wind, right? So that was the baseline. And over time, because of research that's been done and improvements in manufacturing, that cost of solar went all the way down to like 20, says $36. So that was a reduction of like almost 90% in the cost of it. This jump is because of the tariffs on China on importing solar panels. So
That's outrageous.
so that was
Absolutely outrageous.
a pretty significant jump there. But in any case, boy, can we go into that? I am so, just not to get into the politics of it too much, but to make this more of a dialogue, because I like to have a dialogue. It's much more interesting to do that. I'm a conservative environmentalist. I would be in favor of getting rid of all subsidies for all energy. Because right now, nuclear gets a subsidy, other federal government are the insurers. Because they can't get private insurance because of the risk. Oil and gas gets the write-off, the value of the oil and the gas that they pump out of the ground, in addition to all the other subsidies that you get. So if you put it onto a level field, which is what this represents, solar wins out, wind wins out. It's even cheaper now with the subsidies that there are, but it would win on its own. Yeah.
I understand this levelizing, but how about the cost to break even from the initial cost to build the infrastructure?
This
Repeat the question too for the.
Yeah, so he asked, what about the initial cost to build the infrastructure? And by that, if you mean the actual plant that produces the energy, this takes that into account. All is upfront cost averaged over the entire lifespan of the project, divided by the amount of power that's generated to get you an average cost per megawatt hour.
Just thinking, how fast is the return on the investment? Longer with solar or longer with, obviously, nuclear is much longer.
It's unbelievably short on solar. It's about 8. I see figures from 6 to 12 years. And the 6 is for the large scale solar because it's so much cheaper to do that. The 12 is for like residential roofs or parking lots because it's twice as expensive per kilowatt hour to build that. Yes, sir.
What's the amortization period? What's the expected life expectancy on the solar panels?
This is a very interesting question. You could answer it 2 ways. And thank you for reminding me. So he's asking me, how long do the projects last, basically?
Well, the life expectancy of a solar panel.
Of a panel, the first panel made in 1954 by Bell Labs, which might have been in Columbus, Ohio, but I'm not sure which Bell Lab it was. I'm from Columbus, is still operating. But it's only at about 20% efficiency, right? So what they say is for these large scale plants, they take out a 35-year lease because they think that that's the horizon for when they think that they want to re-examine whether or not they want to get a new permit and a new lease. That plant will still be economical then. They repower them and add new panels onto them because the new panels are so much cheaper and so much more efficient that they can make more money by getting rid of the old panels and putting on new panels. And then they use the old panels in like low income housing and other types of projects like that for a lot of them. I'm gonna move on if I can. This economics is really important. So yeah.
I would start with the question as to where do you, how can you eliminate the need for energy? You know, more efficient things.
With more efficient things?
Insulated housing.
Right.
Okay.
That's very important.
How many kilowatts do you say?
That is the most, by far the most efficient way to generate electricity is through investments in that.
You don't need.
So you're right. I mean, this building could be heated in the winter entirely by passive solar and good insulation. but it would have cost a lot more to design it that way. So these are the trade-offs that we do. So if we as a society wanted to go that direction, we could, and some societies are going more in that direction.
COVID, we had enough cardboard boxes delivered to our house to insulate our attic with another 12 inches.
There it
of
So
Yeah, that happened.
that's good. So now I want to go into just some of the basics of how a solar panel does generate electricity. Let me see, is it in here? Let me see if I can get my YouTube to work at the same time. No, not going to be able to do that. Let me see if I can open this link this way. Copy, I'm going to have to open up Safari, go this way. Paste and go.
Thinking about going solar.
At
but
one time,
whether it's
that
worth it for
feature
your
worked
home,
where I could
well,
click it.
before you get quotes, there are
That
3
works.
things you need.
How do solar panels generate electricity? Electricity is the flow of electrons around a circuit. In a solar panel, energy from the sun prompts these electrons to start flowing. But how? It's all to do with the photovoltaic cells that solar panels are made from. Photovoltaic cells are made out of 2 layers of silicon. One layer is positively charged and the other is negatively charged, creating an electric field that will enable an electric current to be generated. When sunlight hits the cell, light particles knock some of the electrons within the silicon free from their bonds. These are drawn to the positively charged silicon layer. However, a bridge between the 2 layers only lets electrons cross in one direction, from positive to negative. So instead, the electrons are collected by conductive metal plates that move them from the solar cell into a circuit where they flow freely as electricity. This electricity can be used in your home, stored in a battery or electric car, or exported to the electricity grid. Standard solar panels will generate 100% renewable electricity for 25 to 30 years. Good Energy buys electricity from hundreds of solar generators in Britain, along with supporting over 100,000 people who generate their own solar power at home. Switch to Good Energy for power from sun, wind, and water.
Okay, great. So that's just some of the technical stuff. I did not want to have slides on that. But do you have any questions on that, on the basic kind of physics of it? Right? No, you're here for other stuff. Good, let's get into it then. The Virginia Clean Energy Act, like most state acts and like most of the policies that are out there around renewables, are really only taking into account about 1/4 of the energy that we need to generate, right? So these estimates of land use for Virginia to meet the Clean Energy Act goals, which is to make the electricity on the grid carbon-free by 2050, not anything else. That's about 25% of our electrical demand, our energy demand in Virginia. The rest of it, again, is like gasoline and diesel for tractors and cars and coal, which isn't used that much, natural gas, other sources like that that do have carbon. So when I look at this issue, I see numbers like this $160,000, 161,000 acres estimated of land in Virginia needed for solar. And that seems like a lot of acreage. But to decarbonize the economy, I'm estimating about 800,000 acres in Virginia. And of that, only about 45,000 would potentially be ag land. But this isn't taking into account the whole data center increase in power, right? Which is estimated to double, quadruple it by 2050. So I'm just talking like this snapshot of when this policy was passed, okay? So 4.9 million acres for the whole US to decarbonize the economy, 20 million acres across the US. So we're looking at significant potential land use impacts. So
Can you give us a reference? I don't know what 61,000 acres would be, or any of those numbers. Is that the size of Montgomery County, Virginia, or?
That is a great question. There's several million acres in Virginia, so it's estimated to take up about 4%. So about 4%, yes.
What if the solar panel actually points towards the sun? Because, you know, you say that, well, the solar panels got 20% efficiency when the sun's shining straight down.
Uh-huh.
But then as the sun moves during the day, eventually it goes from 100% to 0.
Right.
If the solar panel is actually pointed towards the sun. that would-
So the engineers, this is a good question. He's noting, is it more of a question? Can they make the panels point toward the sun, or it's a suggestion?
Really, you could get a lot of power solar
All right.
if it points towards the sun. In fact, the setup of the thing, you're, you know, building it out, you find the average, right?
Yeah.
Best average of direction of pointing.
So they do have panels that track the sun almost perfectly. It's called a triple axis, so it can go on all 3 axes and follows it around the whole sun. But it takes some extra engineering, upfront cost, and some extra power to operate it. So what they've kind of settled on is single axis. So basically, if the sun's coming up over here in the morning, it's this way. And then as it goes through the whole day, it goes over that. And as we'll see in my presentation, you can take advantage of that for environmental benefits, as well as increased power production. So that's a great point. Okay, so with these badly done projects and including terrible public engagement, it's a pet peeve of mine as an old community organizer, is you blame the public when they get mad at a proposal, when you dump it on them the night before the public hearing, right? Right, so you get my message there. And so what was interesting is a friend of mine that I'm doing research with here, Roby Nilsson and her colleague, Ben Hohen. Roby's at Cornell, Ben's at the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory at Berkeley. Ask developers, what kind of public engagement do you do? And what do you think it should be? And so, yeah, they did say the public can provide some input, but they're not into some kind of back and forth on having the public really recommend things. And what the public wants to do is not only recommend things, but have a sense that those recommendations are going to actually change things. And so that's what I would call co-decision making, where you feel as the public, if they're going to come in and take over 1,000 acres in your county and put this thing in, you'd like to be able to say, can you do X? Can you do Y? And know that they're going to change something, some kind of back and forthing.
Not democracy.
A lot of development isn't. And the unique thing about solar that I will admit is it's the largest scale development that's ever been done. It's unlike any other development. It is so large. Those huge malls down in Christiansburg, yeah, those got built over the course of decades and decades and decades, right? And so we've got about 2% of the land in the US now covered up in urban areas. But now we're talking about 4% in the next 20 years, kind of in these really big chunks. So I will admit this is really big. And so again, as an environmentalist, this caught my attention. So what did I go to? The old Brundtland Commission classic sustainability approach, because there are thousands of things that can vary in a project, and how are we going to pay attention to what's most important? So economic development, environmental protection, and social equity. So I sort of said it should follow these principles here. And then I sort of tried to map out what's the existing process for siting and my recommended process. And I'm testing this process, okay? I've done it at one location that I'll talk about here. So right now, the developer identifies a potential site secretly with their computer algorithms, GIS, figures out where the land's okay, where the power lines are, makes some guess about whether or not it might be workable. And then they approach a landowner and they get them usually to sign a non-disclosure agreement and give them a couple $1,000 and say, Now we're going to come onto your land and test the soil and run more calculations. Nobody knows about it. They might go to the city council, and the way that they do, they keep things mum until the developer wants to announce it, and they might struggle back and forth on announcing it sooner. So some developers do that. And this process from here to here can just take a year, and then the feasibility study might take another year. They might, I left out a phase here for the sake of simplicity. They might apply to the power grid if they're going to try to sell the power into the big transmission grid and try to get an approval for that. As the public, we can find out about that. And I've got those lists, but hardly anybody knows if a project is being explored for their community. If they get their approval, it might cost tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars to do that. They might decide, oop, it's going to be too expensive to do the project, so we'll back out. And a majority of projects back out then. So maybe there's no need to alarm the public and engage the public at that point. But I would say as soon as they decide to go, then, and this would all be new, these phase 2 here, they should begin to engage the public. And there are kind of two strands of thought here with engaging the public. The one is send out a notice that's legally required a week or two before the public hearing, have one public hearing. People can line up in a room and give their couple minutes worth. They will bear with whatever opposition there is, make friends with the decision makers and try to get it done. Another way is to engage the public more, maybe have some open houses a month or two before. And another way would be to come into the community a year or two earlier and go to fairs and give out monies to local nonprofits and sort of make friends in the community. But in none of those approaches is there generally much actually change in the project to respond to community concerns. There's a little bit of community benefits when they give money to the community. But I'm trying to figure out what percentage of the project total costs they should just agree to give the community as community benefits. Right now in Virginia, they're required to give about $1,400 per megawatt of the project rated size to the permitting authority, which in Montgomery County, except for Blacksburg, would be the county. So all that money goes into the county coffers, and the people in the neighborhood, the locality where it is, may not see any direct benefits. So again, this lack of good distribution of the cost of having it close to you and the benefits of getting the revenue aren't being done. Yes, sir.
The money that's put back.
Well, the developer will say the community can sort it out through their political process. That's not for us to decide. I differ and say they should work with that immediate impacted community, which to me, according to the research that another colleague did that's not in the slideshow, he looked at about 800,000 real estate transactions across the country in the last 6 years for housing prices. Housing prices went down by an average of about 4% to up to 2.5 miles out away from the project. Not because people could see it, because it controlled for that, and it's independent of seeing it because of the fear of it. The reputation that there would be property losses caused the property losses to happen. So this is really interesting to work with. As an aside, in my farm in New York before I moved here, I built solar on my farm. And my real estate agent said, we're not going to be able to increase the value of the house to account for the cost of your solar panels. And I said, yeah, you can. Let's work on this together. And at least she was willing to. And I said, here are the numbers on how much it's reduced my utility bill. We're going to give them this value of it. And so she's like, okay. I'm like, frame this as a sustainable farm. And she's like, okay, I'll try. And sure enough, I got my $25,000 back out of it, right? So that's in the case of solar on my house, and in the case of solar kind of like down the road, I think a similar process might help. Another process that could help, and my colleague Zhenshan Chen, who did this study nationally, is redoing it just for Virginia, as I would suggest to developers that they just give the landowners up to 2.5 miles away, that 4%. Just cut the check and get it done with, right? So the question is that affordable for them? And I can't get the industry to participate in a study with me.
What again, solar power is supposed to be benefits to the community. So, and you don't show that your electric costs will be reduced. With your solar power plant. Therefore, we have an enthusiastic response from the local public.
Yeah, interestingly enough, because of the way that the economics of it, they generally sell it to the grid. They're not even allowed to sell it to the community. There's this incredibly convoluted process for them to be able to actually just give community members some money on the side to reduce their utility bills.
And it's deliberate corruption and contortion in the economic process.
It's,
Take an example, France. France passed a law, presumably democratic, saying that all parking lots over a certain size must have solar panels.
right.
Okay, now they got the support of the country, they're doing it, there's no land lost to agriculture, and it would seem that it's a net benefit to the whole society.
They're in a different place politically than our country when it comes to renewable energy.
Not as price efficient as buying a bag acreage. I know this in Arizona because I parked at the Tucson. And if you park under the solar panels, you pay more. Park under the solar panels so that your car in long term has this extra shading. So they're making money that way. And then they're also got all this, because what airport doesn't have parking and more parking?
Right.
Exceedingly loud parking. They also use that same parking or solar panel parking combo in Tucson in a number of larger restaurants. They don't
Right.
have enough acreage.
So the discussion is,
I'm asking you, as you've got the answer completely, but you know, why aren't we promoting?
I need to bring the people on Zoom up to speed. So the discussion has gone to, why don't we put more solar on parking lots, right? And the short answer is you can see in the European nations a greater commitment to addressing climate change than we have here. So they have policies that would support that. In the United States, you can see now the pushback against the policies of the last administration. And the policies of the last administration were supporting residential solar, solar at businesses from the 30% tax credit, right? So now in the current budget bill, our proposals to completely eliminate that. So we're actually moving backwards. To go to the point of the affordability of it though, one of the things that I'm sensitive to is if we want to make this transition for the entire grid, we need relatively cheap electricity. And so as a matter of equity, we need that. Now, a private landowner, like I was on my farm, decided to take out a loan. It would have a payback of 10 years or 12 years. I could afford that, right? And so smaller places are doing that. Let me jump to this woman and then jump back into my presentation. Yes, ma'am.
Focusing on the stakeholder of the community members, but other power company isn't a big stakeholder. And my understanding is sometimes they don't like solar power because you are no longer paying for electricity. Oh, you're, so the stakeholder is power company, and I just wondered if we're gonna address that.
So the question is, the power companies are stakeholders too, and they sometimes do not like and even oppose solar on homes. You can see I'm a little gray. 30 years ago in Ohio, I worked to promote the bill to get rates for the solar power that was generated in excess of what you needed to be paid at the same rate that you would buy the electricity, right? From the companies, they fought it tooth and nail. So yeah, they fight it. So in some sense, it's a political fight that way. I teach both public policy, energy policy, environmental policy. And so I like to think of it from these different angles. Yeah,
Because the communities of Moscow doesn't like the natural gas.
right.
So it's not just solar, it's, they don't want it in their yard, I guess.
There is some of that. Okay, so let's move along then. I was gonna talk about the siting process. I think I'm gonna start to skip ahead so I can get more quickly to the recommendations that I have. But there is quite a review process in the state. I would argue that the standards are pretty low. They've got new stormwater erosion standards coming into effect July 1st. They got a 1-year extension on the implementation of those soil erosion and sediment control standards. So now they're going to be better. Some mitigation, I didn't go into this in this. If you cut down a certain amount of forest, you have to plant new forest or pay into a fund for new forest to be planted. If you take a certain amount of prime farmland out of production, you have to pay some damages for that. So it's been very interesting when I work with developers and the state to see the developers saying you're going to make us go broke and it's going to put everybody out of business to do solar. And the state's just like, you can afford it. So like many new policies, it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out. But in any case, DEQ does review it. And I guess part of my project is to test whether or not we can really take a comprehensive look at how to build these things better, right? So here we go. For Virginia Tech, I thought I would pilot Virginia Tech building its own facilities. To speak roughly, technically what they would do is they would borrow the money at reduced rates because it's a state organization. And there's actually a state fund with a very low interest rate for them to borrow the money from that doesn't go against the bonding capacity. So we took care of that argument. That took me a year to sort out. So I could work with the administration to share that. No, we do have bonding authority. We can do that. The second thing is what we would do is then get the land either from Virginia Tech's Catawba Sustainability Center, shown here, or across the street, the Catawba Hospital, which is also state-owned. Basically, the rent would be free, the lease would be free, and then we would pay a developer to come in and build it and operate it and manage it. But we would also pay them to teach our Virginia Tech Electric service how to operate it and manage it. So that as we expanded this, we would build up workforce training and we would build up capacity to do additional projects. So I wanted to see if my public engagement process that I'm proposing here was going to work. And most of you probably know where McAfee's Knob parking lot is out in Catawba. Yeah. So it's out there. So I did it as a class project. They thought I was crazy and disorganized because every week I would say things like, well, we need to change what we're doing. Because the Appalachian Trail community found out and they're pretty upset. And I'm like, I totally understand they're upset. We need to make sure that we do certain things and address them and engage them. And I'd be like, okay, and I tried to tell them this is the way life is. You make some big grand plan of what you want to do, and then getting there is really complicated. You need to be agile and flexible. So in 2019, we did it. And I'll show some of the process that we did with the community, but the community bought into it 10 to 20 megawatts of power out there. The Appalachian Trail community agreed to it. And I was very happy, and the Roanoke Planning Commission supported it and the community supported it. And then when we were moving forward with the climate action plan at Virginia Tech, they funded me again to double check with the community and rerun some numbers. So I did that in 2023. So in terms of the things that we wanted to look at with the community, first of all, greenhouse gas reductions. How much is 10 to 20 megawatts going to do? And it was going to be nice. It was going to be a good couple percent of Virginia Tech's overall needs. So we were happy with that, starting to chip away from it. It had to have low visual impact. And so I worked with landscape architects, and they taught me their language and their techniques for doing that. And that was cool. We wanted to protect the soil when we did it. So my colleague Lee Daniels out of, let's see, College of Agriculture, who developed some of the new state standards, has come up with recommendations for how to do that. We figured out how to protect the forest when we did that, basically cutting down almost none and planting twice as much where we needed that, just to make some of the parcels a little bit bigger in some places and to hide the view in other places. This kind of back and forth with the community on that. We wanted to plan for invasive species reduction. And because I'm in the Department of Fish and Wildlife, we spent a lot of time thinking about how you could design a facility for that. Okay. The biggest thing was looking at it. People said you will see it when you hike out the McAfee. And the only place that you could see it was from the fire trail close to 311 through the cut for the power line. And I thought, why do you care about this view? All you're looking at is a power line and some power poles down the hill. And they're like, well, we care. And I'm like, okay. So we adjusted it. And part of these pictures that you see was a $20,000 that I got the university to fund to hire a landscape architect firm, Hill Studio, out of Roanoke. And then I paid my undergraduate student who hiked out here all summer long to take these pictures. So we said, like, the angle of view from a person's eyes is this wide, and we need it 6 feet high above the ground. You need this camera exposure. We want the light level outside to be certain things. So we really carefully did these photos. And then we superimposed panels. So way down here, you can barely see some panels here. And the AT community said, okay, that's okay. That's all right. We'll live with that. For the sake of getting solar, for the sake of getting VT moving forward, we can live with that, right? So we did about 30 of these photos from viewpoints that the AT community and the community members had identified as important. And we went through this process with each one. Boy, have I abbreviated what I normally do on this, and I'm still running way over. I would show you the photos and how they X'd out areas of panels that they didn't want. And so we took those out, and then we redid the visual images. And so it worked. For soils, interestingly enough, if you take a conventional cropland field that's in corn production without no-till, there's a fair amount of erosion and some loss of nutrients. If you convert that to a solar facility for 35 years, and you plant a good seed mix of cool season grass, warm season grass, clover, native wildflowers, you will dramatically improve the quality of the soil, reduce the erosion, increase pollinators, increase small mammal populations, increase small predator populations, and you can take these facilities completely out after 35 years. And in peri-urban areas, it will have been protected from housing development, and then people can make the choice. The farmer can choose to keep it or take it out. What we're finding is the income that the farmer gets, which is also about $1,400 per acre for their land for 30 years. It keeps them in business, so they don't have to sell it off. And so they view it as a way to preserve farmland. So this whole thing that we're destroying farmland is true if you don't protect the soil. If you come in with a bulldozer and you don't do these things, and it's false if you do it the right way. So we're doing a lot of work with American Farmland Trust and the Farm Bureau and other organizations about these points.
Looking at using it as grazing land, I've seen. a lot of
Exactly.
Keep under it.
Yeah, that one was intentionally planned for sheep, and I think it's wonderful. Virginia used to have an incredible sheep population. And when I moved here, I live out in Craig on purpose, so I'm out there in the hinterlands in a socially diverse community. It's pretty nice. There were a lot of donkeys. I said, what's up with the donkeys? And people said, well, a long time ago, we had sheep. Now we have beef cattle, and we still have the donkeys. And so it's very interesting. The market for sheep in the United States is such that we import well over half of our sheep, of our lamb for eating. So I think in Virginia, there's an incredible economic opportunity from this. So thanks for bringing that up. So these are different things that you can do to protect the soil so that you can bring it back into agriculture. Okay, and then, oh boy, lots of details in our stuff. So I'm in the process of writing up a scorecard, working with Cornell and Lawrence Livermore, so that we can sort of identify all these things that need to be done, so that in the state, a community could like score the proposals and ask developers, are you doing this? Are you doing that? So that they can try to hold the developers more to account. Stormwater basins are usually undersized. They can be made larger. Most people don't know that you're allowed to have basically your stormwater basins only hold 10 years rainfall. So once in a 10-year event is all it's required to hold. And after that, if it overflows and things go everywhere, it's okay. So my suggestion would be to increase that number to a 100-year storm event is what our faculty are recommending. I'd like to see the economics of that though.
Is this equivalent to putting panels over canals to reduce evaporation? Or even collecting the water? I mean, the panels have rainwater channels or something to collect the water. Or usage.
You mean for the stormwater management?
Well, there must be some.
Well, first of all, I understand in California, they've got these long canals to deliver water.
Yeah.
To the farmer. And if they covered them with solar panels, they could reduce the evaporation.
Yeah.
Therefore get a lot more water for farming. It would also seem if you have many acres of solar panels and you actually connected the panels to some sort of rainwater gutters, that you could again collect water, because you're not growing underneath the panel, if you're not growing.
If you're not, right.
Take your point about growing underneath the panel.
Yeah.
Shape, but anyway.
It's interesting. Yes, sir.
At this point, there's been no mention of using abandoned mine sites for siting these facilities.
That's, I'm backing up. Friends of mine just did a national survey on public acceptance. Boy, do they support them on that. You are so right. And there's projects in Virginia. The Nature Conservancy has partnered with Sun Tribe and a very large solar developer to do 17 abandoned mine sites in the state. So I think that there should be more of that. I totally agree. It's really good.
Do you know how many existing sites in Virginia are being used at this point?
One, just one. Yeah, it's a long process. It's a very long process.
Yeah. No, so we'll look at all 5 years.
So it takes a while to get the money together to reclaim the land so that you can then build on it. There's a guy who generated a company to figure out, rather than driving piles into the ground, that has been so disturbed, which makes the engineers wary of how strong the panels will be in winds and such. If you drive it into that old reclaimed land, he figured out a way to just basically make a huge plastic bucket and fill it up with dirt and then put them on top of that. And so this is gonna be his thing to try to do that. There's not enough abandoned mine land to really repower the state, I don't think, but I think it's a great idea. So going on to wildlife, one guy who has hundreds and hundreds of acres in Northern Virginia has seen bobwhite come back. It's amazing on his land. They had disappeared. And the thought is, and we'd love to do a study on it out of our department, is that the quail were being predated upon in the other fields when they were in cropland. But when you put a fence around the whole area and you planted this good native vegetation that, and the reason why I talk about warm season grasses is it's clumpier. So birds like it and wildlife likes it a little bit more. And they weren't predated upon, so the population rebounded. It's very interesting. The other thing is, we figured out from our research that if you've got a fence around all your solar arrays to, keep people out, to protect them from getting accidentally electrocuted, right? If you just do 25 feet inside the fence of transitional habitat, like shrubs and such, and then you just mow those down like every 5 years so that it remains as shrubs and such, it's a huge wildlife benefit. If you can see in the background, the big trees there, if you were to then take like 25 or 50 feet between the fenced in area and then the big grassy area out to those trees and plant transitional habitat, again, not that expensive to do, but big wildlife benefits. And what I'm suggesting to the developers, and they can really take credit for actually doing wildlife improvements if they do these things relatively low cost. So I'm going for a grant right now to actually try to measure that. Okay, social equity. This is the big thing that we started with, right? They just come into the community secretly, announce it at the last minute, and then wonder why people oppose it. So we think and a lot of different dimensions about what's unfair about that. So we think about this as procedural justice and that you should engage the community a little bit more. Substantive, and that the economic benefits get distributed a little bit more. Representational is that, different people get brought to the table. In the case of Catawba, the community really supported it when we said things like, okay, we want to grow food here for the market at VT, which is for the hungry students at VT, which is a real shame for our institution that we don't do more about it. But the faculty have organized and gotten donors to open up a market for free food for students who need it. And the thought is we could take 5, 10 acres at Catawba and just grow vegetables and supply them to the market and supply them to the dining halls and then pay students to grow them as a scholarship, right? And then about 8 years after we invest $250 million to repower the whole university, if we scale this up, we would be getting about $25 million a year in savings that we could apply to the student scholarships. So this is a really big idea of the faculty at the university that we're getting zero traction on. So I'm glad to share it with you as a faculty member who's a gadfly. What?
Make the university a profit center.
Well, the power plant needs to be a profit center, right? So the idea is if the power plant is paying zero for electricity, maybe we could reduce the rates for Blacksburg, 6,000 residents who use the electricity a little bit. Or we could do it especially for low moderate incomes, right? Additional savings. The director of the power plant, of course, wants to keep the money. So this again is something between the faculty and the students in the administration where we say we could change the way that Virginia Tech is perceived and actually operates by going whole hog into this. Okay. So these are things that I've talked about, right? You need to get community members involved. We had talked with neighbors about haying the field, working with an in-state firm to bring the sheep in to graze them, but then they would hire a community member to be a shepherd there. We would do a job training program, these types of things. Some of these things are being done in other locations. Okay. So these are just some of our recommendations. I pretty much talked about all of these. And the last thing for workers is to make sure that they have a living wage. And then that the materials used to build the facility are assured to have no sweatshop labor in them. Okay. This is what the community asked for. These are all things that we could do. Really very low cost with high benefits. Okay. And I talked about this. A colleague of mine, Ralph Hall, in public policy, and I have really penciled out these numbers. This $25 million is like, we penciled it out. That would make 1/2 of the VT Advantage commitment that we've made funded by doing this, and achieve our climate action goal, and feed people, and improve the environment. So with that, I'll open it up to more of your questions. Yes, sir.
So you're talking about in order to achieve the full energy goal for the state, it'll be about 4% of the land mass, is that my understanding of? So what is the effect of, I mean, if you were to say pave 4% of the land mass in Virginia, I imagine that would have a huge like environmental impact in terms of like the heat coming off of like
Oh, yeah.
dark surfaces, all of that. What is the how bad is our solar panels in that regard? I mean, imagine they're black panels, they're absorbing the energy somewhat, but is that an issue? That you're increasing the albedo of the ground essentially?
One of the projects I worked with National Public Radio on is figuring out how misinformation and local opposition has gotten so ubiquitous, right? And the Koch brothers have put hundreds of $millions into funding misinformation. And they funded a faculty member to do this study where he cherry-picked his data and showed that above the panels, there was a heat increase. Well, that was during the day and then some during the night. But if you go 50 feet above the panels, no impact. Underneath the panels, it's cooler. They're actually designed to absorb all that electricity. And not only that, if you do it right and you put in these good grasses, this actually absorbs more carbon, and the actual panels themselves, instead of producing carbon dioxide to create power, are actually doing it 2 years after the production of the panels, or rather the entire life cycle of a 40-year project. The energy costs for mining, manufacturing, installing, and deconstructing it are recovered after 2 years of operation. It's stunning. It's just amazing for that. So I love that question. That's a good one.
Can you give us maybe through sustainable life for kind of like what you consider good facts to back this information? Because it's hard to sometimes get this full picture and but people go, oh, the cost of the solar panels, you're not looking at the mineral extraction or whatever. Is there a good source that you could give us to?
Is this
As a
slideshow?
layman kind of.
Is this slideshow helpful at all?
I think so.
Doesn't go into a lot of depth on some of that.
Yeah.
That's a really good question. I can try to provide some links to you through Ann, if you'd like. On that, yeah, yes, yes.
We talked about storing.
Oh, yes, that's the big,
A huge problem. First of all, because if you put it in your house and don't have a storage panel, then you have to give your extra electricity during the day to the power company and they give it back to you at night. And of course, they want to cheat on that. They want to charge you one way or the other. One beautiful thing about the car parks is that what if you gave free charging to the cars underneath?
mm,
This would encourage the use of electric cars.
yeah,
In fact, it would seem that, Virginia Tech could make, or even if you charge for charging, It would seem that Virginia Tech could make money out of this.
If you stay at the inn at Virginia Tech and you've got an electric car, they give you free charging.
Recharge.
Don't tell anybody, but when I go for a meeting, I take advantage of it.
Oh, good deal.
I do tell them, I'm here for a meeting. Can I charge my car? And they say yes. So
We tried to get solar panels, I tried to get solar panels on that church. And we had various problems with respect. But it stopped in the end because to get enough electricity to eliminate the church's electric bill, we'd have to have so many solar panels. And there's a limit to what the, for a business, what the electric company will do this trading process. And we were like 50% over that.
I didn't know about that. I'll have to look into that.
I gotta
Right.
say, in light of the time, we should probably save any additional questions for privately afterward. I am Brenda Springer. I'm the treasurer of Sustainable Blacksburg. I want to present you with a small token of
Oh,
appreciation.
thank
A
you.
repurposed tote bag.
Oh, I love it.
And I also want to again promote. Give local NRV today. The next 24 hours is a big push for all charities, including Sustainable Blacksburg and your favorite charity, I'm sure, in the New River Valley. If you go to their website, give local NRV, you can find it, or you can go to some of the events that are happening around town today, including this one. So thank you.
Your favorite besides us, can I ask? Blackbird. My son just told me that Parks and Rec, probably doesn't want me to tell him. Parks and Rec is having a meeting about their new Parks and Rec building. Out there just happening. And I'm just wondering, since you're a Sustainable Blacksburg, are you gonna be there talking about big solar on top of the new Parks and Rec building? Or is this like, you know how you got people in this box and people in this box, or boxes coming together to say, hey, we're gonna build a new building with solar panels on it?
Sustainable Blacksburg does not specifically promote solar as a program, but we certainly have supported solar initiatives in the past. One of our board members is our town of Blacksburg sustainability manager, so I would certainly reach out to her if you have an initiative you want. Yeah.
That's a really good question. I just got in Kentucky at the current Parks and Rec building. And I was whispering to them, are they gonna put solar on that?
Right. I think personally, I think all new buildings and renovations should have solar. In fact, I go to the same church and I just heard from Richard last night, this issue with the solar at the church. And I'm not really sure why getting half of your energy isn't good enough, honestly. But anyway, that's a really good point that we should go to the meeting. I mean, everybody should go to the meetings and have input to.
It's a matter of education and all of this stuff, right? And personal opinions and all the rest of it. I would like Sustainable Blacksburg to investigate solar, to come to an educated decision, and then start advocating for solar. You know, this is something that we are experts on sustainability.
Right.
You are.
I mean,
Okay, and this just doesn't mean removing poison ivy from the local trail.
We require solarized Blacksburg.
Yeah.
right, well, we also hosted a solar open house at one of our buildings last year. So, I mean,
would say that Sustainable Blacksburg is not a political push for this or that, it is an information facilitator. And that helps get people together and different organizations together, but it's not. I believe it's not set up to be, we are pushing this agenda or whatever, you know, even though it's in our, what we'd like to see.
Yeah, you have an agenda on invasive species.
Should we close the Zoom?
You have an agenda.
Yeah.
Right.
It's,
And they had a conversation.
yeah.
This one, politics is just a poison word, you know, it's